The moment the elevator doors opened, and Zara saw who was standing inside, her stomach dropped straight through the floor. It was him. The man from the gala the night before. The one she had shoved away from her colleague and thrown a glass of water at in front of 200 people. He recognized her at the same moment. She could tell by the way the corner of his mouth lifted, just slightly, like he was trying very hard not to smile. "Good morning," he said. Zara stepped into the elevator anyway, because there was no graceful way to retreat, and she had a presentation in 11 minutes. The doors closed. Neither of them spoke until the elevator stopped at the 14th floor, and his assistant appeared in the opening, slightly breathless. "Mr. Ashford, they're ready for you in the boardroom." Zara watched him walk out. Then she watched the doors close again, and tried to understand what had just happened to her life. She had grown up in Barrie, Ontario, the kind of town where everybody knew everybody, and nobody ever really left. Her mother, Patricia, had stayed, her aunts had stayed, her grandmother had stayed until the day she died in the same house she was born in. Zara had left at 19 with a scholarship to Ryerson and a suitcase that was slightly too heavy to lift properly, and she had never moved back. That was 11 years ago. She was 30 now, running the financial compliance division at Haverfield & Sons, one of the oldest investment firms in Toronto, and she was good at her job in the quiet, steady way that people who are genuinely good at something tend to be. She didn't need a lot of attention for it. She didn't need a lot of anything if she was being honest. Her mother called on Sunday mornings without fail. The conversation always ended the same way. "Your cousin Blythe is pregnant again." "That's wonderful, Mom." Third one. "Can you imagine? And she's only 28. "Good for Blythe, Zara." A pause. The particular kind her mother used before saying something she'd already rehearsed. "When are you going to bring someone home?" "Just once." "Someone." "Anyone. I don't care if he's a doctor or a plumber. I just want to see that you're not going to be alone forever." "I'm not alone. I have friends." "Friends." Her mother said the word like it was a type of consolation prize. "Your father and I won't be here forever, you know. Dad's 62 and trains for half marathons." "Zara." "Mom, I have to go. I have an early meeting." She didn't have an early meeting. She had a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle and a Sunday morning that belonged entirely to herself, and she refused to feel guilty about that. The thing about Zara and relationships was that she had thought about it carefully, the way she thought about most things carefully, and she had arrived at a conclusion that made sense to her even if it made nobody else happy. She had watched her parents fight for 20 years over money and priorities, and whose turn it was to compromise on something important. She had watched her friend Imogen walk into a marriage at 25 and walk out of it at 29 with 2 kids and a mortgage she couldn't afford alone. She had watched, and she had decided that the math simply did not add up in her favor. So she worked, and she ran along the lake on Saturday mornings, and she had dinner with her colleague and closest friend Deja on Thursdays, and she was, by most measurable standards, completely fine. She had been fine right up until the gala. Haverfield & Sons hosted a charity gala every autumn at the Fairmont Royal York. It was one of those events that looked elegant from the outside and felt exhausting from the inside, full of people in expensive clothes making conversation they didn't mean. Zara wore a dark green dress she'd bought 2 years ago and had never found a reason to wear, and she stood near the windows with Deja and a glass of sparkling water, watching the room. Deja was the only person Zara had ever worked with who made the job feel like something other than a job. She was warm and sharp and laughed at things that were actually funny, which was rarer than it should have been. She was also, that evening, 3 glasses into what she called charity wine, which was apparently what you called free wine at a charity event. "That man over there keeps looking at you," Deja said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Please don't point." "I didn't point. I gestured." "There's a difference. There really isn't. He's been looking since we walked in. Tall, dark suit, good jaw." Deja took another sip. "Very good jaw. I'm not here to evaluate jawlines. You're here eating free canapés and watching other people network. You might as well evaluate some jawlines while you're at it." Zara didn't look. She had a personal policy about not looking when someone pointed out that she was being watched, because it always resulted in eye contact, and eye contact always resulted in conversation, and conversation at events like this almost always resulted in someone trying to give her a business card. Later, she would think about how differently the evening might have gone if she had just looked. Instead, about 40 minutes later, she was coming back from the restroom when she heard Deja's voice, higher than usual, saying something sharp. Zara moved toward it without thinking. She rounded the corner near the coat check and found Deja backed against the wall by a man in a navy jacket who was standing far too close, his hand on her arm, saying something low and insistent. Zara didn't hesitate. She stepped between them, picked up the glass of water on the nearby table, and poured it directly onto his shirt. The man sputtered, staggered back, looked at her like she had lost her mind. She said no, Zara said. Her voice was very calm. She had always been calm when it mattered. 3 times from what I heard. You should go. People were watching. The man looked around, calculated something, and left. Dija grabbed Zara's hand. I love you. I love you so much. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm completely fine. That was incredible. She squeezed her hand harder. You do know who that was, right? Someone who needed a glass of water thrown at him. He's the new chairman of the Caldwell Group, the firm that just bought 40% of Haverfield. Zara absorbed this information, which means, Deja continued carefully, he is essentially now part owner of the company where we both work. Zara set the empty glass down on the table. I see, she said. His name was Reed Ashford. She found this out the next morning, when he walked into the boardroom, where her team was waiting to present the quarterly compliance review. And her new department head introduced him as the incoming executive director, appointed by the Caldwell Group to oversee the firm's restructuring. He sat down at the head of the table. He looked at her, she looked at him. Something happened in the room that she couldn't quite name. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, I understand you lead this division. I do, she said. Good. Please continue, she continued. She had spent 2 weeks preparing the presentation, and she knew it perfectly, and she delivered it perfectly. And the entire time she was aware of him watching her with the particular attention of someone who is trying to figure out whether they find a situation funny or inconvenient, and has not yet decided. Afterward, when everyone was filing out, he stopped beside her desk. You didn't apologize, he said. For what, she asked, even though she knew. For last night, the man was harassing my colleague. I'd do it again. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. I saw most of it. I was on my way over when you got there first. He paused. I just wasn't expecting the water. It was the nearest option. Fair enough. He picked up one of her folders, glanced at the label, set it back down. You do good work, Ms. Whitmore. I read your division's reports on the flight in. Thorough. Thank you. I'll be in the building 3 days a week for the next quarter. You'll report directly to me. He left before she could decide how she felt about any of it. Dejas appeared in the doorway the moment he was gone. So, don't. He's your new boss. I know. The man whose shirt you ruined is your new boss. Deja, I just want to make sure you're fully processing. I'm processing, Zara said. I'm processing very calmly. Please go back to your desk. She sat down in her chair and looked at the city through the window for a while. Then she pulled up the Caldwell Group's corporate structure and read everything she could find about Reed Ashford in 45 minutes. Which was enough to tell her that he was 36, had grown up in Ottawa, had spent the last 8 years running international acquisitions out of London, and had never been photographed at anything with a date beside him. She closed the browser. It didn't mean anything. She was simply being thorough. It was what she did. The following weeks settled into something she would not have predicted. A working rhythm that was, against all logic, comfortable. Reed was direct in the way that people who have run things for a long time tend to be. He said what he meant and expected you to say what you meant back, and he didn't seem interested in the kind of performative deference that most executives collected like a hobby. He asked her questions and actually listened to the answers. He pushed back on her recommendations sometimes, and she pushed back on his, and nothing collapsed because of it. She caught herself staying later than she needed to, on the evenings he was in the building. She told herself it was because there was work to finish. There was always work to finish. One Thursday, he appeared at her office door at 6:30, when the floor was mostly empty. Have you eaten? She looked up. What? Food. Have you had any since this morning? Because I haven't, and there's a place 2 blocks over that stays open late. She should have said no. She had dinner with Deja on Thursdays. She had a whole routine. Let me text Deja, she said instead, and reached for her phone. They ended up at a small Italian place on King Street where the tables were too close together, and the menu had not been updated in at least a decade. Reed ordered in a way that suggested he had been there before, which surprised her. You know this place? She asked. I grew up coming to Toronto on school trips. My mother's family is from here. This place has been here since before I was born. He broke a piece of bread. My grandmother used to bring me when I was small. She said it was the only Italian food in the city that tasted like something other than ambition. Zara laughed before she could stop herself. It was a real laugh, the kind that came out slightly too loud. Reed looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You should do that more often, he said. What? Laugh like you mean it. She looked down at her menu. Her face felt warm. I laugh plenty. You laugh politely. It's different. She didn't answer that. But she stayed for dessert, which she hadn't planned to do, and she walked back to the office to get her bag afterward with a feeling in her chest that she was very deliberately not examining. Deja examined it for her the next morning. You had dinner with him. It wasn't dinner. We both needed to eat and we were in the same building. That's what dinner is, Zara. It was a business continuation. You got cannoli. He ordered it. I had a few bites. Deja put down her coffee. You like him. I respect him professionally. You like him and it's terrifying you. Deja, I'm just saying what I see. Can you see it more quietly? I have a call in 10 minutes. She made it another 2 weeks before she called her mother on a Tuesday instead of a Sunday, which was so out of character that Patricia answered on the first ring, asking if something was wrong. Nothing's wrong, Zara said. She was sitting on her couch in her apartment in Liberty Village, looking at the lights outside her window. I just wanted to talk. A pause, then gently, what is it, sweetheart? There's someone. At work. It's not anything, I wanted to tell someone. Her mother was quiet for a moment in the particular way that meant she was being careful. Do you like him? I don't know yet. That sounds like a yes to me. Mom, Zara. A maybe is still a yes when you've never said maybe before. She sat with that for a while after she hung up. Her mother was not usually right about these things in a useful way. But she was right about that. The company's winter client reception was held at a venue in the distillery district, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The kind of place that tried very hard to look like it wasn't trying. Zara arrived with Deja and spent the first hour circulating the way she was supposed to, talking to people whose names she would forget by morning. Reed found her near the bar. You look like someone doing homework, he said. I'm networking. You're cataloging people by how quickly you can exit the conversation. That's also networking. He handed her a glass of wine, though she hadn't asked for one, and stood beside her at the edge of the room rather than in the middle of it. It felt, she noticed, like he had chosen the edge because she was there, not because he preferred the edge. They talked about things that weren't work. He told her about the 8 years in London, the parts that were interesting, and the parts that were grinding and lonely. She told him about leaving Barry, and never going back in the way that most people don't. He didn't say that was sad, which she appreciated. At some point the reception thinned and they were still talking, and Deja walked past and caught Zara's eye, with an expression that communicated approximately 17 separate things. Later, in the car she'd called, Reed leaned back and said nothing for a while. Then, I'd like to see you outside of work. Zara looked at the streetlights going past. That's complicated. I know, I'm asking anyway. Raid Zara. He said her name like it was a full sentence. I've been careful my whole career. I know how this looks, I'm asking anyway. She thought about her mother, about Blythe and her 3 children, about Deja telling her she laughed politely, about a Tuesday phone call she had never made before. One dinner, she said, an actual dinner, not a business continuation. He smiled, it changed his face entirely. She hadn't seen it before, not like that. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she agreed. She didn't tell Deja about the dinner until Friday afternoon, which she told herself was because she didn't want to make it into something before it was something. Deja took this news and immediately made it into something. I need to know what you're wearing. I need to know the restaurant. It's just dinner, Deja. You said those exact words about drinks with Marcus in 2019, and then he moved to Vancouver and you cried for 2 weeks. I didn't cry. I was tired. There's a difference. There really isn't. Zara had forgotten she'd said that. Saturday was good. Genuinely, unexpectedly good. He took her to a small restaurant on Ossington. She did walk past 100 times and never gone into. And they stayed for 3 hours. And she laughed the way Deja had described. Too loud, like she meant it. And he looked at her the same way he had in the Italian restaurant. And she stopped pretending she didn't know what the feeling in her chest was. He walked her to her door. She did not invite him in. He didn't ask. Next time, he said, you pick. Presumptuous, she said. Optimistic. She went inside and sat on her couch for a while in the dark. Then she texted Deja. It was good. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, I know, they kept it quiet at work. Or tried to. Deja knew. Reed's assistant, a composed woman named Penny, appeared to know without being told, the way assistants of a certain efficiency always do. Nobody else seemed to notice, or if they did, they were professional enough not to say so. Zara told her mother on the 3rd Sunday in November. Patricia was so quiet for so long that Zara thought the call had dropped. Mom, I'm here. I'm just. A sound that might have been a breath or a swallowed tear. I'm happy, sweetheart. I'm just very happy. It's early. I don't want you to start planning anything. I'm not planning anything, Mom. I'm simply making a list of questions for when I meet him. It's different. Please do not make a list. There was a list. She found out about it at Christmas, when she brought Reed home to Barry because he had asked to come, and she had run out of reasons to say not yet. Her mother had a list of questions on a notepad in the kitchen, tucked under the fruit bowl. Reed found it before Zara did. He picked it up, read it, and when her mother came in and saw him holding it, the expression on Patricia's face went through approximately 6 stages of mortification before he said, "These are good questions. Should we just go through them now?" Patricia sat down at the kitchen table, and they spent an hour going through the list while Zara's father, a quiet man named Gerald, who showed affection through food, kept appearing in the doorway to offer people sandwiches. Driving back to Toronto, Zara was very still in the passenger seat. "What?" Reed asked. "They love you," she said. "My parents love you. My father made you 3 sandwiches. He made you 2. He likes you more than me," Reed laughed. He reached across and took her hand where it rested on her knee, and she let him, and the highway lights went past, and she thought, "Oh, so this is what it's supposed to feel like." She was the one who said it first, which surprised her. It was an unremarkable evening in February. They were in her apartment. She was going over documents at the kitchen table. He was reading on the couch with his shoes off, and she looked up at some point, and it simply occurred to her, plainly and without ceremony, that she was completely in love with him. "Reed," she said. He looked up from his book. "I love you." He looked at her for a long moment. She watched something move across his face that she couldn't name but recognized. The expression of a person who has been careful for a very long time and is suddenly, carefully not. "I've been waiting," he said quietly, "for you to say that since the dinner at the Italian place." "That was October. I know. You've been waiting since October? I didn't want to say it first and scare you off." She got up from the table and went and sat beside him on the couch, and he put his arm around her and she put her head against his shoulder, and they stayed like that for a long time without needing to say anything else. She should have known it was going too well. That was what she thought later, sitting in the hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She should have known. It was a March evening, slick with the particular black ice that comes in the last weeks of winter in Ontario, when the temperature drops below 0 overnight, and everything that was wet turns treacherous. They were driving back from a weekend in Kingston. Her idea, his planning, 2 days that had been so easy and happy. She'd felt slightly outside of herself the whole time, like she was watching someone else's life and admiring it. The other car ran a red light on the bypass. Everything after that came in fragments. The impact, the sound, her own voice saying his name, the cold of the pavement when she pushed the car door open, the ambulance and the voices and a paramedic asking her questions she answered without knowing what she said. Reed had turned the car at the last second. He took the impact that should have been hers. She escaped with a broken collarbone and a gash on her arm that needed 12 stitches. He was unconscious when they arrived at the hospital and didn't wake up for 3 days. When he finally did, the doctor used the phrase selective amnesia in a way that Zara would spend weeks afterward replaying, trying to find a different meaning. The injury had affected one specific area of memory. He could recall his name, his career, his family, the Caldwell Group, Haverfield. He could remember Penny in the Toronto office and the flight from London. He could not remember Zara, not the Italian restaurant, not the distillery district, not Barry or the list under the fruit bowl or the February evening on the couch. He looked at her in the hospital room, like she was a kind stranger, and said, "I'm sorry, I don't. Do we know each other professionally?" Deja drove her home that night and stayed until almost 4 in the morning and didn't say much because there wasn't much to say. Zara sat at her kitchen table and looked at the documents she had been working on the night before they left for Kingston, still spread across the surface. She'd meant to file them when she got back. She went back to work on Monday because work was the only thing that had a shape to it. She filed her documents. She ran her division. When Reed came back to the building 2 weeks after his discharge, she was professional and precise and utterly unreadable. He was different, or not different, reverted, she thought. He was the way he had been in those first weeks, before dinner on King Street, before Saturday on Ossington, focused, direct, capable. He did not seem to notice that anything between them had changed, because for him nothing had changed. Nothing had existed to change. She told herself she was fine. She was not fine. She ran along the lake on Saturday mornings and came home and stood in the shower for too long and then called her mother, who cried quietly in the way Patricia had always cried. as if she were trying not to take up too much space with her sadness. "Come home," her mother said. "I can't come home. I have work, Zara. Come home." She didn't go home. But she started going into the office later, and she stopped staying late on the evenings Reed was in the building, and she routed her reports through Penny instead of delivering them herself. She built the distance carefully, the way you build something you know will have to hold weight. The hardest part was not that he didn't remember her. The hardest part was that he was still exactly himself. She would watch him in a meeting, patient, perceptive, 2 steps ahead, and she would think, "There you are," and then she would look away. It was Deja who noticed first that something else was wrong. "Candace has been spending a lot of time in his office," she said one Thursday over dinner. Zara looked up. Candace Mercer was a senior associate who had transferred in from the Caldwell Group's Calgary office around the same time as the accident, beautiful and polished and very aware of both. "She's on the restructuring file," Zara said. "She's on the restructuring file 20 minutes at a time, multiple times a day." "Deja, I'm just telling you what I see. What you see isn't my business anymore, Zara." Deja put down her fork. "It is your business. You just don't remember that it is." She looked away. The thing about Candace was that she was good at her job. Zara had reviewed her work and it was genuinely solid. She had no professional complaint. And if Reed, with no memory of Zara, found his attention moving toward someone else, someone with no complicated history, no silence to read, no absence that needed explaining, that was not anyone's fault. That was just the math of the situation. It was still terrible. She watched it happen slowly over the following weeks. Candace appearing at the edge of meetings. Candace in the elevator. Candace laughing at something Reed said in the kitchen area in a way that carried down the hall. She watched and she said nothing, because she had no claim to say anything, and because the version of herself who would have had something to say no longer seemed to exist. She handed in a request for a 2-week leave in April. Personal reasons. She had vacation time accumulated from the years she had not taken vacation. And she thought that if she could just get out of the building for a while, she might be able to put herself back in order. She went home to Barry. Her father made her soup and didn't ask questions. Her mother sat with her in the evenings, and sometimes they talked and sometimes they didn't. She ran in the mornings along streets she had run as a teenager, past the houses that were the same, and the ones that had changed. And she thought about nothing in a way that was almost medicinal. On her second week, she got a call from Penny. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm sorry to bother you during your leave." "What is it, Penny?" "I thought you should know there's been a development." A pause. Penny was not a woman who paused. "The investigation into the accident has concluded. The other driver had a prior impaired driving charge that was not disclosed. His insurance company is cooperating fully. But there's also something else they found." Zara was quiet. The car that ran the light. It had been reported as stolen 2 days before the accident, from a parking structure. The police looked at the security footage. Someone accessed it using a key fob that was traced back to Candace Mercer. The line was very quiet for a long time. "Mr. Ashford has been informed," Penny continued carefully. He asked me to call you." She was back in Toronto by the next morning. She went to the office and Penny met her at the elevator and took her directly to Reed's office. And when she walked in, he was standing at the window with his back to the door. He turned around when he heard her. He looked like someone who had been awake for a long time. He also looked, for the first time since the hospital, like the version of himself she recognized. "I've been going through things," he said. "My phone, my email, photos." He paused. "Penny also gave me a file she had been keeping. She said she thought I might need it eventually." "Penny kept a file?" Apparently from almost the beginning. Something moved across his face. "Zara, I'm trying to understand what I don't remember. I can read the facts of it. I can see, I have photographs of us in Barrie, at Christmas, and I have absolutely no memory of any of it." His voice was steady, but the effort of keeping it that way was visible. "I don't know how to ask you to. You don't have to ask me anything. I have to ask you everything. I don't know where to start." He crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she had to look up at him. "The photographs from Christmas. You're laughing in all of them, not the way you laugh in meetings." Her throat tightened. "My father gave you 3 sandwiches. Penny's file says he gave me 3 sandwiches. I don't." He stopped. "I want to remember. I don't know if I will. But I know that someone arranged for a car to run a red light, and I know why. And I know that I have spent 4 months not knowing you when apparently I had spent months choosing to." He reached up slowly and tucked a strand of her hair back, the way she remembered him doing, the way he couldn't remember doing. "I am so sorry." She was not going to cry about this anymore, that she was not going to cry about this anymore. She had used up her allowance for crying about this. I hate that you don't remember, she said. I know. I hate that you looked at me like a stranger. I know. I hate that it's still. She stopped, took a breath. I'm still in love with you. That didn't go anywhere. It was very inconvenient. He pulled her in and held her the way he had in February on the couch, and she pressed her face against his shoulder and let herself stay there. Candace was arrested on Thursday of that week. The evidence was not circumstantial. The key fob, the timing, a series of messages deleted from her work phone but recovered by the IT department showing communication with the impaired driver, whom it turned out she knew from Calgary. Her motive, as far as anyone could reconstruct it, was a convergence of professional ambition and a fixation on Reed that had preceded her transfer to Toronto by over a year. She had seen an opportunity in the accident that she had not created but had chosen to use. The court would untangle the exact degree of her culpability, but the key fob was going to be very difficult to explain. Zara found all of this out in pieces over several days. She sat with each piece and tried to feel something clean and simple like anger, but it mostly just felt like exhaustion. She didn't cause the accident, Deja said on Thursday evening, but she used it. I know. That's a special kind of terrible. I know. Are you okay? Zara thought about it for a moment. I think I will be. It's different. Raid's memory didn't come back in a rush the way it did in films, where someone touches a familiar object and everything floods in at once. It came back in pieces, over weeks. A word, a smell, a specific quality of light on a Sunday morning that suddenly meant something it hadn't the Sunday before. One evening he called her at 9 o'clock. The Italian place on King Street, he said. What about it? I remembered it. The bread. The thing your grandmother used to say about the food. She was very still. That was your grandmother. Not mine, right? Yes. A pause. I remembered the whole dinner. You laughed, and it was too loud, and I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how. She sat down on the couch. You said I should do it more often. I know, I remember saying it. His voice was different. Zara, I remember October. She put her hand over her mouth. I remember October, he said again, steadier. I'm going to remember the rest. He did. Not all at once, and not without difficulty. And there were evenings when he would go quiet, in a way she had learned to recognize, and she would simply sit with him without demanding anything. Because that was what you did when you loved someone who was putting themselves back together. Her mother came to Toronto in May and cried when she saw them both, and then immediately pretended she had not been crying. Your father wanted to come, she said, accepting a cup of tea from Reed with both hands. But someone had to stay and watch the dog. You don't have a dog, Zara said. We're getting a dog. Patricia settled onto the couch with great dignity. Raid, are you eating enough? You look thinner. I'm fine, Patricia. He's fine, Mom. That's what thin people always say. She looked at them both, seated together on the other couch, and something softened in her face. You're coming home for the long weekend. We might, Zara said. Not might. Are. Patricia drank her tea. Your father is making his famous ribs. He made them last summer and you didn't come and I had to hear about it for 3 months. Reed looked at Zara. She looked at him. The expression on his face was the one she recognized from the photographs Penny had kept in a file, the one he'd had at Christmas, the one that meant he was somewhere he had not expected to be and found it, against all prior evidence, exactly right. We're coming, Zara said. Her mother looked satisfied in the way of someone who has been right about something for a very long time. She had always believed that staying independent was the only version of life that made sense to her. No compromises, no negotiation, no one else's needs laid over hers like a second map that never quite lined up. She had looked at the evidence and made her decision and defended it for years with the particular stubbornness of someone who is defending something they are not entirely sure about. She thought about that sometimes, in the evenings, in the apartment that was gradually accumulating evidence of another person. A book left on the table, a coffee mug that wasn't hers, a second set of keys on the hook by the door. The evidence had changed. She had updated her conclusion accordingly. That was just being thorough.